Let's jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to objectively map out the narrative flow and the deep philosophical themes of one of the most widely read and, honestly, structurally unique literary texts in all of history. We're talking about the Gospel of John. Whether you're coming at this as a historical document, a theological cornerstone, or just a fascinating piece of ancient literature, its structure is, well, it's remarkably deliberate. So, let's start right at the cosmic opening. Notice how the author doesn't just give us a standard family tree. Instead, they immediately establish this incredibly bold philosophical framework before introducing a single human character. By using the term the Word, the text aligns itself right away with deep, ancient concepts of reason and cosmic order. It's framing the narrative not just as a local biography, but as an event of absolute universal significance. And right from that prologue, the text leans heavily into dualities. We see this striking contrast between the divine, eternal concept of light, which the text says the darkness hasn't understood, and the highly tangible, gritty human reality of the Word becoming flesh and literally making its dwelling among us. This dynamic interplay between the cosmic and the physical, that is going to drive the entire narrative forward. To help us digest this massive 21-chapter text efficiently, we've broken the narrative down into 5 clear acts. 1. The cosmic prologue. 2. Miraculous signs and evidence. 3. The metaphorical claims. 4. Betrayal and the cross. And finally 5. The empty tomb. Act 1. The cosmic prologue. Setting the philosophical stage. Let's see how this builds, beginning with a prologue that powerfully positions its central figure within a deep historical and spiritual lineage. The text strategically name-drops revered historical figures right out of the gate. It carefully notes that while the law came through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus. It also brings in John the Baptist, not as the light himself, but explicitly as a witness sent to testify to the light. This specific language of witnessing and testifying, it kind of turns the whole narrative into a sort of literary courtroom. Moving on to Act 2, Miraculous Signs and Evidence, Building the Case. As we move into chapters 2 through 11, the text completely pivots from abstract philosophy to concrete action. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the narrative systematically presents these events. They aren't just random miracles. They're explicitly framed as signs. The author doesn't list every miracle Jesus ever performed, right? Instead, we get this carefully curated evidence designed to prove a central point. We jump from turning water into choice wine at a wedding in Cana, to healing a royal official's dying son from afar, to feeding 5,000 people with just 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then finally to the astonishing act of raising Lazarus from the dead after 4 days in a tomb. And that raising of Lazarus, it acts as the ultimate turning point in the text. It's presented as a deliberate demonstration of power, done specifically for God's glory, but structurally, it is the absolute catalyst for the climax. This specific sign forces the religious authorities to convene, which leads the high priest Caiaphas to famously declare that it's better for one man to die for the people. That moment right there sets the plot for his death completely into motion. This brings us to Act 3, the metaphorical claims, the I am statements. As these incredible physical signs occur, the text pairs them with deeply metaphorical discourses where Jesus makes some profound claims about his own identity. This beautifully illustrates exactly how the author operates. The text consistently connects tangible, very real physical human needs like hunger, guidance, thirst, directly to spiritual solutions claimed by the protagonist. So after feeding the 5,000, he claims to be the bread of life, saying whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Before opening the eyes of the blind, he's the light of the world. He's the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep, and the source of living water welling up to eternal life. The physical signs literally validate the metaphorical claims. But these metaphors, they continually escalate throughout the narrative. They aren't just gentle, comforting teachings. They culminate in direct, highly provocative statements like, I and the Father are one, and before Abraham was born, I am. The text reports that these intense claims of equality with God deeply, deeply divided the crowds, repeatedly leading his opponents to pick up stones to execute him right there for blasphemy. Which leads into Act 4, Betrayal and the Cross, the final hours. Here in Chapter 13, the narrative pace slows down dramatically, transitioning from those very public miracles to the intimate, highly suspenseful final hours before the crucifixion. The text does something brilliant here. It deliberately juxtaposes a profoundly humble act, the master washing his disciples' feet, with this incredible, rising narrative tension.
During this meal, he gives them a new command to love one another, but in the exact same breath, drops the dramatic revelation that Judas is about to hand him over. Oh, and that Peter, his most vocal supporter, will disown him 3 times before the sun even comes up.
From the arrest in the Olive Grove all the way to the cross, the text maps out a rapid, highly structured timeline unfolding over just a single night and morning. The author really wants us to feel the inevitability of these events. We move swiftly from the nighttime betrayal to Peter's denials, straight into the tense political theater of the trial before Pilate, and finally out to Golgotha by the 6th hour. During that Roman trial, the narrative highlights a profound philosophical clash. In his statement to Pilate, the author contrasts Jesus' claim of a kingdom built purely on truth against Pilate's very earthly, very lethal political authority. When Pilate cynically responds, "What is truth?" it just perfectly encapsulates the tension between the divine reality the text is arguing for and the worldly power that seems to be winning in that exact moment. The crucifixion itself is reported with stark, unflinching, objective details. The text specifically emphasizes that these events, like the soldiers deciding not to tear his seamless undergarment but instead casting lots for it, or the sudden flow of blood and water from his pierced side, it frames these as exact fulfillments of ancient prophecies. So when he takes his final breath and says, "It is finished," it's presented not as a tragic defeat, but as the triumphant completion of a predetermined mission. And that brings us to the final act of our explainer, Act 5, the empty tomb, the resurrection and purpose. We're looking at the events of the 3rd day and the author's ultimate revelation for why this entire account was constructed in the first place. The text builds the resurrection narrative so meticulously. It starts in the dark, right, with Mary Magdalene discovering the heavy stone already removed from the tomb. It escalates to Peter investigating the curiously folded linen strips left behind inside. Finally, it culminates in physical appearances. First Mary, who actually mistakes him for the gardener at first, and then to the disciples hiding behind locked doors, turning their absolute grief into profound joy. Now, interestingly, the text directly addresses the concept of reader doubt by including Thomas's skepticism. Thomas kind of represents the critical observer for us. His doubt is resolved only when he is offered tangible, physical proof a week later, prompting his famous declaration, "My Lord and my God." The author uses this exact moment to extend a blessing to those who have not seen and yet have believed. Then, in the final epilogue by the Sea of Tiberias, the author throws in these incredibly granular eyewitness details. When the disciples catch fish at the direction of the resurrected Jesus, the text specifically notes there were exactly 153 large fish in the net, and yet amazingly, the net wasn't torn. These hyper-specific details, they are deployed deliberately to ground these massive miraculous claims in stark, undeniable reality. So the absolute crux of the whole thing is right here in chapter 20. This is where the author literally breaks the fourth wall. It's a clear, completely unambiguous thesis statement for the entire text. The author admits, hey, Jesus did many other signs that aren't even in this book, but they confirm that this specific collection of signs, metaphors, and history was compiled as hard evidence for you, the reader, so you could make a decision. Which leaves us with this final thought. When you view this ancient text through its highly structured, incredibly argumentative lens, how does it shift your understanding of the story it tells? It's really not just a passive recounting of events. It is a dynamic, living case being presented directly to its audience. I hope this structural walkthrough has illuminated the brilliant architecture of this text for you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.